In 2001, a crashed American EP-3 surveillance aircraft made an emergency landing on Chinese soil after a mid-air collision with a Chinese fighter jet. Before Washington could negotiate its return, Chinese engineers had already disassembled and photographed nearly every classified sensor system inside it. That single incident quietly accelerated an entire generation of Chinese military technology. But the single most brazen theft on this list involves a stealth fighter so similar to its American counterpart that U.S. defense officials privately admitted they could barely tell the silhouettes apart on radar. And that aircraft is coming later in this video. This is the complete story of every major weapon system China has reverse engineered, stolen or directly copied from Russia and the West, transforming a once outdated military into one of the most technologically advanced fighting forces on Earth. Shenyang J-11 from the Su-27. China purchased a limited license to assemble Russian Su-27 fighters in the 1990s. But Chinese engineers quietly reverse-engineered the airframe far beyond the agreed terms, producing the unlicensed J-11B with Chinese-made engines and avionics. Moscow was furious. Russian officials publicly accused Beijing of stealing a design that had taken decades and billions of rubles to perfect. And future Russian arms sales to China came with far stricter intellectual property protections as a direct result. Shan H-6 from the Tu-16. China's long-range bomber fleet is built entirely on Soviet Tu-16 blueprints acquired in the 1950s. Decades after Russia retired its own Tu-16s, China kept upgrading the H-6 airframe with modern engines and cruise missiles, turning a Cold War relic into a nuclear-capable strategic bomber still flying today. Type 96 and Type 99. Tanks from Soviet T-72 lineage. Chinese armor designers studied, captured, and purchased Soviet T-72 technology extensively, blending it with composite armor concepts to produce the Type 96 and later Type 99 main battle tanks. Vehicles that Western intelligence assessed as startlingly close in layout and firepower philosophy to their Soviet ancestors. HQ-9. Air Defense System from the S-300. China's HQ-9 surface-to-air missile system bears such a striking resemblance to Russia's S-300 that Russian defense analysts have openly called it a copy, right down to the radar guidance architecture and missile canister dimensions. Despite Chinese officials insisting it was independently developed. Liaoning aircraft carrier from the Varyag. China purchased the unfinished Soviet carrier Varyag from Ukraine in 1998, officially claiming it would become a floating casino. Instead, Chinese engineers spent over a decade completing and reverse engineering the hull, turning it into the Liaoning, China's first operational aircraft carrier, and the direct engineering foundation for every Chinese carrier built since WS-10. Engine technology from Ukrainian turbine expertise. Ukrainian aerospace engineers, many left unemployed after the Soviet collapse, were recruited to help China solve its chronic jet engine reliability problems. Technology transfers that dramatically accelerated the WS-10 engine, program now powering China's domestic fighter fleet. Chengdu J-20 from F-22 and F-35. Cyber espionage. This is the aircraft from the hook of this video. Chinese state-sponsored hackers, identified by American cybersecurity firms in operations spanning nearly a decade, breached defense contractor networks and extracted terabytes of classified data related to the F-22 and F-35 stealth programs. The resulting J-20 stealth fighter shares such a similar external silhouette to American fifth-generation jets that Pentagon officials have acknowledged the resemblance was almost certainly not a coincidence. Shy FC-31 from F-35. Design data. A second stealth fighter, the FC-31, emerged shortly after the J-20 with design elements even more directly reminiscent of the F-35, particularly its single-engine layout and weapons bay configuration, reinforcing intelligence assessments that Chinese hackers had obtained extensive F-35 technical documentation.ch-4 and Wing-Lung drones from Predator design philosophy. China's CH-4 and Wing-Lung drone programs closely mirror the American MQ-1 Predator and MQ-9 Reaper in silhouette, sensor placement, and mission profile, allowing China to become the world's largest exporter of armed drones to nations. The United States refused to sell weaponized drones to under export restrictions. DF-21D, anti-ship missile from studying American carrier doctrine. While not a direct copy of a single Western weapon, the DF-21D carrier-killer ballistic missile was explicitly developed after Chinese military planners spent years studying American aircraft carrier strike group vulnerabilities exposed during the 1995 Taiwan Strait crisis. Reverse engineering not hardware but the entire strategic playbook for countering it. F-35. Data breach via contractor networks. Beyond the J-20 itself, American investigators confirmed that Chinese hackers extracted specific F-35 ejection seat, radar, and engine schematics through a breach of Australian defense subcontractors' poorly secured servers. One of several documented intrusion points feeding China's stealth aircraft development.C-AO2. Anti-ship missile lineage from French Exocet study, China's C-802. Anti-ship missile family shows clear conceptual lineage traced back to studies of the French Exocet missile, whose devastating performance during the Falklands War convinced Chinese naval planners to prioritize a domestic equivalent, Type 052D destroyer radar from Aegis System study. Chinese naval engineers extensively studied publicly available and illicitly obtained information about the American Aegis combat system while developing the Type 052D destroyer's integrated radar and missile architecture, producing a system Western analysts consider functionally comparable in basic concept.pl-15. Missile technology from captured Western missile fragments. Chinese researchers have been documented studying fragments and captured components of Western air-to-air missiles obtained through various international arms markets and conflict zones. Technology believed to have informed guidance system improvements in the long-range PL-15 missile, Type 636. Submarine quieting from Kilo-class purchases. China purchased a dozen Russian Kilo-class submarines in the 1990s and 2000s specifically to study their advanced acoustic quieting technology, knowledge that was subsequently folded into the design of China's own domestically built Yuan-class submarines, narrowing a noise signature gap that had left Chinese submarines dangerously detectable for decades. CJ-10, cruise missile from studying the Tomahawk and KH-55, China's CJ-10 land attack. CRUISE missile shows design characteristics researchers have linked to both the American Tomahawk and a small number of Soviet KH-55 cruise missiles, acquired through unofficial channels in the 1990s, blending lessons from both rival superpowers into a single domestic weapon. What emerges from this pattern is not simply theft, but an extraordinarily disciplined, decades-long industrial strategy. China's Ministry of State Security has run cyber espionage campaigns specifically targeting Western defense contractors since at least the early 2000s. While its arms purchases from a struggling post-Soviet Russia were consistently followed by unauthorized reverse engineering that strained diplomatic relations between the two nations. Whether through a crashed spy plane in 2001, a discarded Soviet aircraft carrier hull, or a breached defense contractor server, China converted borrowed engineering into an independent, world-class arsenal in a fraction of the time it took the original innovators to develop it. A strategy that has fundamentally altered the global balance of military technology.